Hello and welcome to Moneylife. This is Sucheta Dalal. This week, we're going to again talk about the big news in the market. Not the fact that the markets are going down every day, but the fact that the government is put out an ad saying that it's going to get a new SEBI chairperson. The question that I have is, what about the code of ethics? What about those issues? And are you going to get a new chairperson without settling all of it? It needs to be done first. So while it's okay to issue an advertisement, after having staunchly defended Madhabi Puri Buch, the current chairperson of the Securities and Exchange Board of India, to the extent that neither the Finance Ministry nor the Board of Directors is even willing to consider an investigation or examination of facts or other allegations against her. This is not good for anybody's reputation, neither hers nor that of the regulator, nor the government. Now the government has advertised for the post. So applications have to be submitted till the 17th of February. Her term ends on the 28th. The media has been speculating that this signals the end of her tenure. I would say don't be in such a hurry. This could be rather premature because various political regimes, not just the BJP, has had a short list, and even the final two candidates sometimes are not appointed, a third person is. In fact, a famous case would be that of the UPA, when in a last-minute twist, it appointed CB Bhave as a SEBI chairman with a special ring fence because SEBI was at that time investigating NSDL, the National Securities Depository Limited, which he not only headed, but was the founding managing director. Mr. Bhave had, this is more important, Mr. Bhave had appeared at an interview and said that he does not want the post. And having got it, it was a rather controversial tenure, 2008, which is when SEBI, 16 years ago, wrote this highly questionable code of ethics, which I have discussed in at least 2 previous video blogs. This code of ethics, which the current SEBI chairperson says she has followed, is only applicable to the chairperson, the board, and old-time members of SEBI. Now, given this history, Ms. Buch could well be in the running for an extension, except that there are 2 serious hurdles here. First, that she had dodged a summons from the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament, which is headed by K.C. Venugopal of the Congress. This happened in October 24. That is not over as yet. It can be reissued, but it will mean a lot of embarrassment to the government to have a SEBI chairperson called in for questioning. Secondly, Mahua Moitra, member of parliament of the Trinamool Congress, and a couple of others have filed complaints with the Lokpal. This is alleging improper conduct and quid pro quo arrangements under the Prevention of Corruption Act. The complaints are based on allegations by Hindenburg Research, which blew this whole issue out in the open, and the Congress party. Now, the Lokpal investigation is going on. In fact, a set of questions have been asked, counter questions, what we hear, and the next date for it is 28th February, which is the very day on which she ends her tenure. So it'll be a little difficult for the government, because they can brazen it out, it has happened in the past, to give her an extension when these 2 things are happening. My question in today's video blog is, will the new chairperson occupy the corner room of the SEBI head with a big elephant sitting out there, which is the dodgy code of ethics? It's one thing for the government to steamroll the opposition and say no JPC, no examination, no committee, but leaving the issue unaddressed when you have a new chairperson reflects poorly not only on the government's commitment to transparency and ethics, but the standing of SEBI as a regulatory body. This has to be addressed. It's a national interest. The problem with SEBI's code of ethics are manifold, and they're worth repeating over here, although some of you may have heard them in previous blogs. In October 2024, when all this came out, I had written, and I'd said in the video blog, that SEBI's conflict code, I'm going to call it shorthand, is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. Why did I say this? Because it is so flimsy, and it was cobbled together in 2018 at the instance of Professor Dr. Mohan Gopal. He's a legal luminary. He's a former head of the National Judicial Academy and was then a member of the board. He himself was subject to a lot of harassment simply because his investigation did not give a clean chit to the then chairperson. It is at his insistence that this code happened, but it's a voluntary code, and the action that should have followed hasn't happened. Now, this code has to be ratified. We still don't understand why it is weaker than the code that's applicable to all SEBI employees right to the level of ED. Second, we don't understand why it is untouched for 16 years, even when the regulator has been framing literally thousands of new rules for every market intermediary, market participant, market infrastructure institution. But this code, applicable to the top 4 or 6 people, is untouched. What I've said in the past in video blogs is that the code itself is illegal. Section 29 and 31 of the SEBI Act require that any rules that are framed by the regulator have to be published in the official gazette and approved by Parliament. This was not done for 16 years. There is a view that this is a code. It's not a regulation or a rule, so it doesn't need government clearance. Well, if that is so, then there are other problems. For instance, Advocate Murli Neelakantan points out that the SEBI code itself says that this code shall be in addition to provisions of Section 7A of the SEBI Act. This is Rules 3.1, 19A1, whatever. You can look it up. I have it in my column. Now, these service rules are far more stringent than the SEBI code, which means that the SEBI board is only embarrassing itself by refusing to investigate conflict of interest and claiming that the chairperson adhered to the conflict code of 2008. Was it in its entirety? Because the code for government servants is so strict that you just cannot have shares and do the things that were happening. In fact, the present controversy underscores the fact that when private individuals who opt to serve the nation in a regulatory capacity must be willing to subject themselves to transparency, much more transparency about their personal transactions, stricter disclosures, and restrictions on their financial dealings. There is also a need for a clear disclosure process with regard to employee stock options, which are at the center of controversy here, rental and consultancy income, and all this has to be covered by enforceable rules. Can't be. She recused herself, no questions asked. In fact, reasons for recusal from issues both internally and at board meetings need to be clearly disclosed and documented. Now, it turns out that SEBI rules already provide for this, but it's not clear whether they were followed because SEBI is not answering, the board is not answering, the finance ministry is not answering. I actually reached out to Professor Mohan Gopal, at whose instance the first code happened. He made 2 important points. First, he says that it's not the 2008 code alone. Section 32 of the SEBI Act is overarching in nature, and it states that the provisions are in addition to other laws in force. Secondly, Rule 3.1 of the SEBI Terms and Conditions of Service of the Chairman and Members is very clear that neither the Chairman nor the WTM will have any such financial or other interests that are likely to prejudicially affect his functions as chairman and member. What does this mean? That you just cannot have these financial interests. It's not a question of I have ESOPs, I have some consultancy income, I've recused myself, I've informed the board. You just cannot have it. That is the rule. Second, Regulation 9 of the SEBI procedure for board meetings regulations. Now, there are clear regulations about this. These are 2001 regulations. They require all board members to disclose the nature of their interest in issues that come up for discussion. These have to be recorded in the proceedings. This means that it's not just mere recusal, there's a recording. Now, was it done? The point is, we don't know. It would be so much better if SEBI was transparent and said, yes, it was done, it was recorded, and submitted it to the Lokpal. In fact, the Lokpal can call for this information. We don't know if it's happened because all this goes on in camera. Now, Dr. Mohan Gopal also pointed out that unlike the Reserve Bank of India, SEBI WTMs not only have managerial and executive authority, which are subject to the board oversight, but they have votes on the board, which means that they are decision makers, they have legal powers of quasi-legal powers because they issue orders, they have executive authority. So when a matter comes up to the board, their votes influence the final resolution. In contrast, deputy governors and government nominees on the RBI board have no voting rights. In fact, Dr. Mohan Gopal says that the 2008 code was broadly based on the thinking at that time, 16 years ago. In 2004-5, he says there was a working group on conflict of interest in the Indian financial services sector. Believe it or not, there was a group like this. Of course, the group at that time believed that principle-based regulation was more important, not rule-based one. I think over the years, people have found you need enforceable rules and disclosures because principle-based thing doesn't work in an unprincipled society. The world has moved on. India has to move on. But very conveniently, this set of rules was not untouched for 16 years. Think about it. Dr. Gopal is also emphatic that the 2008 conflict code was, and I quote him, never meant to offer safe haven or refuge to any member or chairperson from being held accountable or to avoid or dilute the application of other applicable laws, rules, and regulations. They should not be put to such use. In his view, the conflict code needed to be supplemented with detailed enforceable rules. Now, if you look at all that is going on, SEBI refusing to answer RTI questions, Finance Ministry saying everything is done, the public doesn't need to know, investors who are subject to rules don't need to know, members of parliament do not need to know, and Lokpal in camera. All this is bad for SEBI because if you followed the rules, come out in the open and say you have done it, we don't know what rules were followed. So where do we go from here? Because we are assuming that a month from now, there's going to be a new chairperson. I think the solution is straightforward. There is a conflict code of 2008. It was not formally approved by Parliament or gazetted. The Finance Ministry can simply tell SEBI, scrap it. If needed, a new working group can be set up to draft a code with enforceable rules, which also accommodates the peculiarities of lateral entrants from the private sector, who may come with ESOPs, who may come with past income, who may have fancy houses with high rent, but fix all that with a new code of ethics, new rules that are in line with what the rest of the world is doing. Until then, the most stringent Government of India regulations need to apply to the new chairperson. In fact, it needs to apply even if this chairperson gets an extension, and it needs to be done now along with that advertisement. If you agree, you think the credibility of our markets is important, please do share to this video and subscribe to it. Thank you.